Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We are running a little bit behind schedule and have a little change up in the schedule, but we will get all our speakers up here today one way or another. My name is Janice, Rael. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Delaware Valley Americans United 2015 conference, Reclaiming Religious Freedom from the Radical Right. I'm the president of the DVAU chapter. I'm also the vice president, the media chairman, the social media, and the outreach table. So if you'd like to volunteer, please see me after the meeting. I'm delighted to have all of you here today with us for a powerful lineup of expert speakers discussing various aspects of true religious freedom through separation of church and state. Reclaiming religious freedom from the radical right, religious liberty, freedom of conscience, the right to believe or not believe whatever you want about religion, the right to share these beliefs with others and pass them on to your children, the right to contribute your hard-earned money only to the religious institutions of your choice, if any, the right to live your life as you see fit without interference from aggressive religious groups who want to impose their doctrines on you with the help of the government. These ideas are all part of what makes America special. Enshrined in the First Amendment to our Constitution, they are central to our identity as a free people. Without freedom of religion, we wouldn't be the nation that we are. The radical right is trying to take this away from us. They're twisting the meaning of the words religious freedom to suit their own theocratic purposes. We mustn't let that happen. Today, we are gathered to listen to 5 incredible speakers talking about true religious freedom and how we can reclaim it from the radical right. Let me give you an introduction. January 16th was Religious Freedom Day. Religious Freedom Day commemorates the passage of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. As explained by Americans United's Rob Boston, this bill, drafted by Thomas Jefferson and pushed through the Virginia legislature by James Madison, became law on January 16, 1786. Many scholars regard it as a precursor to the First Amendment. As Rob wrote in AU's Wall of Separation blog, the heart of the law reads, "Be it enacted by the General Assembly that no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever, nor shall be enforced, restrained, molested, or burdened in his body or goods, nor shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief, but that all men shall be free to profess, and by an argument to maintain their opinion in matters of religion, and that the same shall in no wise diminish, enlarge, or affect their civil capacities." Under federal law, the President is required to issue a proclamation recognizing Religious Freedom Day. Under Barack Obama's proclamation for 2015, we find it very, very good. The First Amendment prohibits the government from establishing religion, it reads. It protects the right of every person to practice their faith how they choose, to change their faith, or to practice no faith at all, and to do so free from prosecution and fear. The proclamation goes on to say, this religious freedom allows faith to flourish, and our union is stronger because a vast array of religious communities coexist peacefully with mutual respect for one another. Since the age of Jefferson and Madison, brave women and men of faith have challenged our conscience. Today, our nation continues to be shaped by people of every religion and no religion, bringing us closer to our founding ideals. As heirs to this proud legacy of liberty, we must remain vigilant in our efforts to safeguard these freedoms. But we have a problem. Not everyone is reading Rob Boston's writings in Americans United's Wall of Separation blog. No, they're not reading what our founding fathers really said about religious freedom. They're reading revisionist history by the likes of Newt Gingrich and David Barton. They're being misled by the likes of Pat Robertson and other megachurch preachers. And those people, the people who aren't following our founders' intentions, they have a different view of religious freedom. They think religious freedom means that they have the freedom to do whatever they want with the support of the government and the taxpayer, and you can't. They think they can, and they think you can't. That's not the religious freedom we honor on January 16th on Religious Freedom Day. The Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom was said to be the precursor to the Constitution's First Amendment, ended the state-established church in Virginia, and went on to guarantee religious liberty for all. But that's not what today's radical right would have you believe. No, today's radical right thinks that religious freedom means that even though they're not doctors, they can make the government tell other people what medicine to take, what operations to have, who you can fall in love with, and all sorts of other personal stuff that Thomas Jefferson never seemed to mention in any of his writings. Today's radical right is twisting the words around, changing what religious freedom really means. And this is why the Delaware Valley chapter of Americans United for Separation of Church and State has brought you all here today to find out what we mean by true religious freedom and how we can reclaim our religious liberty from the radical right and build up Jefferson's wall of separation. Our first speaker of the day comes to us from Washington, D.C. She is a communications associate with Americans United for Separation of Church and State. May I introduce AU's Sarah Jones with her talk, Control, the Religious Right's Real Agenda. Please welcome our opening speaker, Sarah Jones.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I think it is now. All right, I'm a little short, so I'm trying not to stand on my tiptoes for the next half hour. As Janice said, I'm Sarah Jones. I'm the Communications Associate with Americans United for Separation of Church and State. If you follow us, you may have seen my work at the Law of Separation blog, right along with Rael Boston, Church and State magazine, and I write freelance for publications like Religious News Service and The Guardian. All on the topic of religious freedom, which is what I'm here to talk to you today about. Earlier this week, I stood with my colleagues in front of the Supreme Court. While we waved our signs outside and, yes, even argued with a few opponents, 9 justices listened to arguments for and against marriage equality. Those arguments are probably familiar to everyone here now. They certainly are to me. Marriage is the union of a man and a woman, said the lawyer for the state of Michigan, and his supporters said the same thing outside the court. It's been this way for millennia. Why change it now? But of course it hasn't been this way for millennia, not in many parts of the world. Many cultures and other religions and non-religion define it quite differently. Marriage isn't a monolithic institution, and this isn't a monolithic country. You wouldn't know that, however, from the arguments the Supreme Court heard this week. This week, 4 states told the nation's highest court that their same-sex marriage bans should stand because of procreation and tradition. It's the tradition argument that should really concern advocates for church-state separation the most. Tradition, as deployed by opponents of marriage equality, is little more than code for religious dogma. After all, to whose tradition do they refer? It's certainly not the tradition of any American who supports LGBT rights. And these bans aren't based on evidence. Studies have repeatedly debunked the notion, so popular among the religious right, that children raised by same-sex couples fare worse than children raised by a man and a woman. This tradition, in other words, doesn't hold up to rational scrutiny. Laws based upon it aren't based on sound public policy. The tradition they're really talking about, the tradition they're going to such great lengths to defend and enforce as law, is doctrine. Specifically, it is the doctrine of fundamentalist Christianity. That's an obvious conflict with the First Amendment, which is why we at Americans United have opposed these bans so frequently and so vehemently. States must prove that there's a rational basis for these laws, and they've adopted tradition to try to do this. They may attempt to disguise their sectarian motivations with secular language, but we know the truth. And so, for that matter, does the religious right. It's not a coincidence that extreme fundamentalist groups turn out in droves to support these marriage bans. They know that when states appeal to tradition, they're really appealing to dogma. The Family Research Council, the Alliance Defending Freedom, the American Family Association, they all support same-sex marriage bans, and that's not because they support states' rights, another popular argument, but because to them, the Bible said so. And they've worked with allies and state legislatures to transform this from mere personal religious belief into law, but not, perhaps, for much longer. Observers on both sides of this issue agree that the court is likely to rule in favor of marriage equality this June. I've heard a lot of fear-mongering this week, and in the months leading up to Tuesday's hearing. Last week, I heard James Dobson, the founder of Focus on the Family, declared that pastors will be forced to officiate same-sex weddings, forbidden from preaching certain portions of Scripture, and finally will be rounded up and jailed if they rebel, possibly in the FEMA camps. I heard similar rhetoric from other extremists, like the Liberty Council's Matt Staver and Scott Lively. Lively, if you don't know, is being sued for human rights violations by sexual minorities of Uganda after stumping for that country's infamous Kill the Gays bill. He also wrote a book claiming that gays orchestrated the Holocaust. He was in front of the Supreme Court this week. I listened to Joshua Duggar of 20 Kids and Counting tell the press, "I believe everyone deserves equal treatment under the law, and that's what we're here standing for. Right now, in America, there is an agenda to silence people of faith, those who hold a dissenting opinion. That's not what America was founded on. America was founded on respect, tolerance, and really not discriminating against people based on their religious convictions." Duggar, of course, said this while arguing for the right to discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation. As fringe as Lively, Duggar, and Dobson are, their ideas have taken root and are spreading quickly within the broader religious right. Major legal organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom now frequently warn of impending doom for fundamentalist Christians if the court recognizes same-sex marriage. But so far, they've been able to provide little evidence for these strong claims. Last year, the Alliance Defending Freedom attempted to scare up such a case of coerced clergy, and only managed to fabricate one in the city of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. A couple who ran a for-profit wedding chapel, not registered as a ministry or a church, but as a profit-making business, tried to file suit against the city of Coeur d'Alene over its anti-discrimination law. As you can likely imagine, that case didn't go far because they weren't registered as a church, but as a business, and businesses have to obey anti-discrimination laws. That's still the only case of its kind the religious right has been able to produce as far as clergy go. Now, I want to take a brief look at some other cases the religious right has trotted out as evidence of its persecution. We can start with Aaron and Melissa Klein, the owners of Sweet Cakes by Melissa. The Kleins refused to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding and cited their religious beliefs as justification. But the Kleins live in Oregon, and Oregon's Equality Act forbids discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and they ran a cake baking store, not a cake baking church. The rejected couple filed a complaint, and the Kleins inevitably lost. They've been crying victim ever since. According to the Kleins and their supporters in the religious right, the state has unfairly burdened their religious freedom by refusing to allow them special privileges, in this case, the right to violate the state's anti-discrimination law with impunity. We hear the same refrain applied to the case of Rael Stutzman, a florist in Washington state. Stutzman is Southern Baptist. Her business, presumably, is not. Nevertheless, she refused to provide flowers for a same-sex wedding, and she, like the Kleins, didn't hesitate to tell her would-be customer why she found his event so objectionable. In the process, she ran afoul of state anti-discrimination laws, and she was sued. She lost, and has since appealed the ruling. She, too, is demanding special privileges from our secular courts. Now some public officials are trying to get in on the game. Early last month, World Magazine, which is a conservative Christian publication for those who are fortunate enough not to know that, published a profile of Janice Schoenbrock, a Missouri court clerk who says that she'll refuse to issue same-sex marriage licenses.